So if you're juggling traveling, kids, and content creation, a bit like me, then the DJI Action 5 Pro might just be your new best friend. I took this with me on a recent trip to Malaysia with my family, and today I'm going to break down exactly how I used it as my go-to travel cam. Now, the DJI Action 5 Pro is a fantastic camera with a 4K 10-bit 422 output with D-Log M color profile, and that basically all means you get very nice looking crispy video for your travel vlogs right out of this little thing. And it's also probably the best alternative to getting the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, which is super popular and is pretty much never in stock in most places. But first things first, I'm gonna go through how I set up my DJI Action 5 Pro to be used as a travel cam and all the settings that I use, and a few tips and tricks on how to get very nice looking footage in various different scenarios. So I'm gonna go through general vlogging scenarios and then also some specialized scenarios where you might be wanting to capture, say, slow motion footage and things like that. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously make sure that you're in the video mode. Now that you're in video mode, you want to swipe upwards, and that's going to allow you to pick your resolution, frame rate, and stabilization. For this, I choose 4K 4:3, and this lets you use the maximum width of the sensor, and also the 4:3 aspect ratio makes it easier to crop into vertical video or horizontal video, meaning that you can actually film for both at the same time. But if you want to film purely vertical or purely horizontal and you don't want to bother with that, then you can still choose the 16:9 and then obviously change the orientation of your camera depending on what you want. Now, for vlogging and general use, I will keep this at 24 FPS because that gives you the more cinematic looking footage. If you're in Europe and UK, you might want to choose 25 FPS, or if you're doing a lot of filming for social media, then 30 FPS is also a good alternative. But I like 24 FPS because it gives you the nice motion blur that makes your footage look cinematic. Now, for your stabilization, you can tap the top right part and choose rock steady. And for my focal length, I actually choose standard D-warp because that doesn't warp the footage, and if I'm going to be using it for things like vlogging, then I don't want action cam looking footage where it's all like warped up and really wide. So the D-warp works the best, and it's at a 15mm focal length, which means it's perfect for things like vlogs. Now, if you swipe back to the home screen and tap on the right hand icon, then you're going to open up the main settings for your exposure control and things like that. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that that Pro button is tapped on the top right hand corner of your screen, because this opens up all of the Pro settings for your camera, and this is what's going to allow you to get the maximum out of it. Now, the first thing you're going to set is your exposure, so let's tap there, and from there what you want to do is you want to make sure you are set to M, meaning manual. And what I tend to do is whatever frame rate I have chosen, so whatever FPS I've chosen, in this case 24, I want to have my shutter, which is on the left hand side, to roughly double. So in this case, I've got it set to 1/50. If you change your frame rate to say 60 FPS or 30 FPS, you want to double that in this setting as well. So if you're at 30 FPS, make sure you choose 1/60. If you choose 60, then 1/120. And if you choose to do 120 FPS, then 1/240. And this ensures that your footage maintains its natural looking motion blur, and your footage will look, again, cinematic. Now, on the right hand side, you've got your ISO, and this is basically your digital brightening. Generally, you want to keep this as low as possible. So if possible, you want to keep it at 100, but I like keeping it at a bit of a range so that if I'm shifting from location to location and the environment changes and the conditions change, there's clouds in the sky, or I go inside somewhere, then I want my exposure to adjust a little bit automatically, but not so much that it affects my image. If you increase your ISO a bit too high, it's going to introduce noise into your footage, and nobody wants that because it's a pain to get rid of afterwards, and your footage might not look as nice and crisp. So what I do is I tend to keep it between 1 to 800, or if I know I'm going to be going somewhere really dark or a lot inside, then I might switch it to 1600, but generally 1 to 800. Now, when you're exposing your footage, when you point your camera at the sky, you want to make sure that you're exposing for your highlights, meaning that you want your highlights to look, well, nice. So your sky should look nice and clear rather than being overly blown out, because even if your shadows are a bit darker, then you can recover them, but if your highlights are a bit too blown out, then you might not be able to recover that. Now, full credit to Teppo Hapoya for providing this little bit of info from his video about the Action 5 Pro. Now that the exposure is set, I'm going to set the color of the camera, and what I tend to do is scroll all the way down to D-Log M 10-bit. That basically is going to give you the maximum dynamic range get the most out of your camera, and basically the camera is going to be able to capture the most details and your footage is going to look that much better. But there is one caveat: you are going to have to edit this later on because it does make your footage look a little bit grey and washed out. You can either do this in the DJI Mimo app, which I think it should be able to do, or you can use free software like DaVinci Resolve, which allows you to color grade and fix up that footage very easily. Now, when you select that mode, if you look on the left-hand side, a new section should show up that says color recovery, and this basically lets you switch between what it looks like actually, which is gray and washed out, and with the colors recovered, and that actually gives you a better idea of what your footage might turn out to look like after you've edited it. So I tend to turn that on. Now we are going to do a few image adjustments. Now before, I did used to leave this alone, but I saw a lot of videos that said that reducing both the texture and noise reduction to -2 actually helps make your footage look cleaner and crisper, because the noise reduction doesn't kick in and doesn't soften up your image, so you get sharper looking footage. And when I tested it out myself, it was right. It did give me slightly sharper looking footage. So what I would suggest is changing that to custom and dropping your texture and noise reduction to -2. Now the only thing left here is your white balance. Now if you are going to be out in the sun or out and about, then you can leave this to 5600, which is basically daylight temperature, or you can put it on auto white balance because it does do a really good job of automatically setting your white balance depending on where you are going. Now those are all of the basic settings. To make my life easier, I will usually add that to a custom mode. So if you swipe down and you hit that little person icon, then you'll be able to add custom modes there. And I've got mine in 2 modes. I've got one for vlogging and I've got one for action stuff, which is slow motion stuff. And that's what I wanted to get along to next. The only thing that you would want to change in your action thing is your frame rate. So keep your 4K and change your frame rate to 60 FPS or 120 FPS, depending on what you're actually trying to capture. But remember, you do want to adjust your shutter speed accordingly, so just make sure you go back to exposure settings and just adjust your shutter speed so that it's double whatever frame rate you've chosen. Now, a quick tip. Like I said before, you want to maintain natural looking motion blur. But because you might be filming out and about a lot, like I did when I was in Malaysia, it was super sunny. Even dropping the ISO down to 100 didn't really make a difference in my exposure. The only thing that you could do from your camera settings to make sure your footage didn't look completely washed out because of the sunlight is up your shutter speed. But what that does is it removes that effect of having natural motion blur. But that's where ND filters come in. Now, I actually purchased a whole bunch of ND filters from Telesin. It's a third-party brand that does all sorts of fantastic gear and accessories. I'll link them below. But what actually happened during my trip is that I actually ended up losing a bunch of them for whatever reason. I don't know. I misplaced them somewhere. I took it off when I didn't need it, and then I put it somewhere, and then anyway, I lost them. So what I did was, midway through my trip, I visited the DJI store and I picked up the original set of ND filters from them. So they look something like this, and then you can just pop them onto the front of the camera like so. And what that does is it acts like sunglasses for your cameras, so you don't need to go in and adjust your shutter speed to get your footage properly exposed. It comes in 3 different strengths essentially. You've got ND8, ND16 and ND32. Most of the time ND8 or 16 did the job for me, depending on how bright it was outside. But if it's super bright, ND32 might be the way to go. Now, one of the biggest wins about having something like this on a trip where you're traveling or with kids is you don't really need to carry a lot of your camera gear with you. This tiny thing pretty much does it all. Even though I did have my Sony a7C II on me while I was out and about, I barely ever took it out because this pretty much did everything. And I didn't even have to keep taking out my phone either, because I had a dedicated tiny device that was doing the job for me. So I could focus on spending time with my family and actually enjoying myself while still knowing that I'm capturing really high quality content with this. No fiddling with lenses or a heavy camera in your hand whilst you're trying to wrangle a 5-year-old. Just something nice, super compact with really good features. For me, it was a super handy tool whilst traveling to document everything I was doing with my family. Now I can capture those precious times and candid moments really easily with this. And again, because it's so small, it's easy to tuck away and pull out whenever I needed it. Now, a couple of other use cases that I use this for are filming BTS footage and POV footage. Now, during the trip, there was one point where I did use this as a POV camera, and that was during my accidental content creator meetup that I held in Kuala Lumpur. I basically had this thing strapped to me pretty much the entire time, and I captured a ton of BTS and POV footage of that meetup. And the best part about it was at night time, so a lot of the time it was actually quite dark, but this camera handled it like a champ. At that point, I did actually set the ISO to 100 to 12,800 because I was going in and out of bright areas and dark areas. But even at the higher ISO levels, the noise levels are really manageable. Because this thing has a bigger sensor, the low light footage coming out of it was actually really good. You can see for yourselves how good that came out, and honestly, it was such a good tool to have on me to be able to capture all of the moments that I wanted to from that meetup. Now, having it with something like this, which is like a DJI selfie stick that I've got, or the extension rod that it comes with in the adventure combo, is absolutely fantastic because you can get so many different angles, things that you wouldn't be able to do with a conventional camera, and it just really makes it a versatile setup to have on you whilst you're out and about traveling or on holiday, or even your daily content creation. Now, some extra tips and tricks. If you're going to be using it the whole day and you want to capture as much stuff as possible, I would highly recommend getting more than one memory card. 256GB memory cards or 128GB memory cards are really good, so just make sure you start and stop your footage. But you're pretty much getting 4 hours out of a 256GB SD card, and then you've got internal storage as well as a backup if you need it. The second thing is make sure you have spare batteries. I bought the adventure combo, which comes with 2 spare batteries, and honestly they came in clutch because I was using it a lot to film pretty much from morning till evening whilst I was out with my family, and just to try and get as much footage from those happy times as I could. And having those extra batteries really saved it. And because like any device, the battery will run dry very quickly, and you don't want to go through the hassle of having to wait to charge it before you can use it again. So if you are a travel vlogger or just somebody who wants to capture precious moments on holiday with their family, and you want to do all of that without any headache, then the DJI Action 5 Pro is seriously worth considering. It's compact, versatile, easy to use, and it's actually smaller and less fiddly than having the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, which I don't own one of, but I've seen and used my friends' ones, and though it is a fantastic device as well, I kind of prefer this over that. If you've got any questions about using the DJI Action 5 Pro or anything that I've said here about my settings, etc., then make sure you drop a comment down below and I will do my best to get back to you. And if you like my content in general, then make sure you like and subscribe. Until next time, this is Kai24 signing out.